We've known for a while now that Nintendo want to get into the movie-making business, and this makes sense. If you've got a load of IPs and you want to make some money on the side, you can make a movie and profit on that. But that's actually not Nintendo's strategy, and that is what I want to focus on in this video, and whether actually they're really shooting themselves in the foot with it. You see, they started off with the Super Mario Bros. Movie in '93, and this was a critical and financial failure. It made 38.9 million worldwide, but it had a budget of 42 to 48 million. It flopped in every single definition of the word, every single way you can think of. And then later on, they had some successes, admittedly. They came back with Detective Pikachu, and this made 150, that had a budget of 150 million, but made a $433 million. So we know that this can be a successful strategy. But recently they've had a annual call, and they've published a translated version of some of these shareholder questions that happened. And they don't just want to profit off the movie. In fact, they don't even really mention that as being their aim. No, instead we have this question over on the meeting. What kind of impact on Nintendo's future do you expect from the appointment of Chris Meledandri, I think that's his name, on the outside director? Nintendo's core business is integrated hardware, software, dedicated video game platform business. That's one hell of a translation. And for the continuous growth of that business, your basic strategy is to expand the number of people who have access to Nintendo IP. And that kind of makes sense at first glance. And then in the answer, they continue with it. It says, with regard to visual content expansion, we are working on the Super Mario movie and other projects. As you pointed out, our core business is the integrated hardware, software, dedicated video game platform business. I hate that sentence. But to keep that business thriving and growing, we need to create opportunities where even people who do not normally play on video game systems can come into contact with Nintendo characters. As part of this effort, visual content could be important for us. And that is very interesting. Their aim with the movie isn't to just profit off a movie. I'd be all for it. It seems like a great idea if you can get the talent behind it. They want to use the movie as their primary aim to get people which have never heard of Nintendo, don't know any of their characters, and don't play games or own any consoles to come into the gaming market and spend the money. Which is weird, because we definitely know that movies and other franchises can benefit from expanding the sort of media that they're transmitting their IPs through. You only have to look at the Metro games and the effect that had on the books. Or Witcher did the similar thing with those books. You had the Game of Thrones series, which definitely helped the sales of that literature. But they've got something in common. All of those moved from a sort of shallower medium to books. People saw the stories that were there. They saw the adaptations, and they wanted to go back to the original source. They wanted to see how the author intended. They wanted to see what was cut out in the which is necessary in these kind of mediums, and see the entire environment. See how things were written. Find out the expanded universe. They go back to the source material and read the original lore. You don't really have that with Mario. I mean, I'm not really up on Mario, but I'm not sure he has extensive lore, especially if you go and play the games. They don't have the deepest narrative story arcs of anything to go by. It's not like a novel. It's nothing like a novel or an epic series of books. And so I'm just not sure how they're going to do that, especially as books. They're like £8 for a paperback. You don't have to spend much to get into that, and especially with ebooks, where they can even be cheaper than that. And that is very different than what you have with Nintendo, where they want you to spend £330 just as the barrier of entry to get there. And I would argue it's far easier to get gamers to go back and buy a book because they're already interested in gaming and that interested themselves. These people aren't gamers. You've not just to convince them to be interested in your IP. They've got to be interested enough to spend £330 to get into a hobby they've never entered. They're not even interested in it. Now that has to be one hell of a movie. That's one hell of a 90 minutes to make that kind of sale. And if anyone's wondering what £330 is, it's $456 in freedom money. And if before you go, that's what it costs in the US. Yes, you don't have the taxes we do, but many countries have these taxes. So this is a reasonable barrier to look at. And I'm not sure this is necessary. I think there's another way. You're trying to convert non-gamers And that's a lot harder than getting gamers interested in your Switch or your IPs. And now the Switch was incredibly successful. Far more successful than I thought they were when I started this. They sold 85 million units of the Switch. And so their entire target audience is 85 million, essentially, because all of their games are exclusive. They don't sell on other platforms, which I think is a mistake, but we'll get to that. Because they don't sell on any other platforms, the only people that can buy their games are 85 million. This is why they're interested in getting people to buy the Switch. But is there another way? Because the Xbox One sold 51 million units, and if you include the different variations, another 3.5, we'll call it 55 million, just to round it out. And the PlayStation 4 sold 116 million units. But those aren't the only platforms. You see, we have PC as well, and PC is a bit harder to nail down because you can just buy all the parts and build a PC. But Steam is a store which virtually all PC gamers have installed. So we can look at 120 million active users monthly for Steam in 2020, and that's an average. Now, this will be underestimated simply for the fact that not everyone will log in on a month, and also compared to these where your PlayStation might die and you might buy another PlayStation, so your sales get counted twice. So if anything, the 120 million is underestimated, but we'll just take the number for the sake of argument in this. If you add up all the other consoles, all the other essential gamers, you end up at around 280 million, compared to the Switch's 85 million. And if you go, well, people that own a Switch probably have another console or a PC, fair enough. We'll still take it down to 200 million extra people that are gamers, that have probably heard of Nintendo, which could buy your games, that want to buy your games. They're waiting with their wallets, and the only people stopping them are Nintendo. So yes, you could go out and you could try and convince people who aren't gamers with a 90-minute movie to come and spend £330 on your Switch. Or the alternative is to just not have exclusive games, to sell on these other platforms, to release on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC, and have an extra free 200 million people who are already interested. They're already your target demographic. How many more sales do you think they would make if they didn't have exclusives? Compared to, how many do you think are really going to buy a console because of a 90-minute Mario movie, even if it's good? I would argue that just an order of magnitude more money would come to Nintendo's pockets if they just released the exclusives. I'm not saying some people won't convert, but the conversion will be so tiny compared to what would happen if they just allowed PC people at PlayStation and the rest to buy their games. Now, some of you are probably going, you've got no evidence for this. Do I not? Because Origin is owned by EA. That's EA's store, and they have big names behind them, obviously being EA, and stuff like Battlefield. Battlefield used to sell on Steam, and then they stopped. They went over to Origin. They even tried to get people interested with things like EA Play, a sort of subscription service. And this didn't last forever, because although they tried several iterations of Battlefield on Origin, mainly because Steam charges 30% of their fee when you buy a game. So they would get an extra 30% when they make a sale on their own platform. And they thought, yeah, we'll definitely make more than 30% if we can. We'll make a bigger bottom line if we keep all of our sales and we don't have to pay the 30% fee. And people will come across. People will come to our platform. It's just a store. It's not like they have to spend £330 to get access to it. All this is an installation of a file. It's very easy. And yet, they went back on Steam. And that is why you can buy Battlefield 2042 on Steam. They even moved EA Play over to Steam. Why? Because it turns out that the 30% fee isn't worth it. Steam has so many more users that they will just make more money. Even if they pay Steam the 30%, they still make more money opening themselves up, not having their own exclusives, even if just to a store. You go where the people are. It's far easier to get people to buy things where they are than try to convince them to move platform, even if it's just opening a different app on a desktop. Now imagine how much more that would be when you need to make them buy an entire extra console. The conversions which are lost is insane. Now, the other argument people might make is that they make money on the Switch and selling services online. And if they opened up all the exclusives, no one would buy a Switch. But I don't think that's true. You see, at the end of the day, Xbox and PlayStation need exclusives because there isn't that much differentiating them. Yes, one platform might be slightly more powerful than another one, or the controllers might be slightly different shapes, but apart from that, they're basically the same. Now, PC doesn't have lockdown exclusives. It doesn't need them. And it has its own demographic that really isn't in competition with consoles. And even console manufacturers have started to learn that now, which is why people like PlayStation and Microsoft are opening up their exclusives to PC. They don't share demographics at all. The people on PC use it because they want to use a mouse or sit at a desk. They want their higher resolution, their more customizability, FPS, the graphic quality that you only get on PC. That's its unique selling point that consoles just don't have. And Switch also has a unique selling point, being quite obviously this. You can hold it in one hand, it's portable. You can take it anywhere. You can't do that with even an ultra-light PC. A laptop is far more unwieldy than this is. And consoles, it's just not possible at all. So people would still buy Switches because of what it is, the reason it was designed. And I think if they had confidence in their own console, in their own hardware, they'd see that. You don't need a special exclusive game to sell this thing. The device sells itself. And that's why it's been so successful and sold so many units. Now, exclusives have benefits for Microsoft and Sony, but they're only harmful to customers. And I only care about customers because that's what I am. I'm just a customer that enjoys gaming. But it also seems to harm Nintendo. And even if some people wouldn't buy a Switch if it didn't have exclusives, I don't think you're going to balance that out by making movies. You're really not. The conversion rate will be so low, there's no way that maths add up. But you will make so much more money selling to a demographic which already knows you exist, is already interested in your game. That you don't really have to convert, and they just buy the game and give you the money there. And yes, you'll lose a cut to stores, but really, the amount of money that you'll already make has already been proven by EA to be worth it. 200 million extra users, over triple your player base, your current user base, is just sitting there waiting to do it. I just don't think that the evidence adds up in any other way. Exclusives are bad for everybody except the platform owners. And even this time, bad for those ones as well. And so I can only think that the reason is that you're just set in your ways, that this is the way you think the industry does it. Everyone else is doing it and you have to too. And you don't even realize that as Nintendo, this is harming you because you think you know better. But really, at the end of the day, if you run the numbers, I think the evidence of what you should do is undeniable. But that's it from me. If you like the video, press like and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. And I'm also interested to know down below what you think. Do you think Nintendo are on the right path and they really should have exclusives? Or do you think they'd just make more money opening it up and exclusives are bad for everyone involved, just like I do? Let me know down below and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.